Our guest for today is someone who seamlessly bridges the gap between theatre, cultural politics, and drama. Mr. Kaustubh Naik is currently pursuing his PhD in the South Asian Studies Department in University of Pennsylvania. But his academic journey has been nothing less or similar but linear. As before delving into the world of performance studies and history, he initially was trained in computer science. Before that, he also holds MPhil in theatre and performance studies at GNU, where he studied the political significance of Marathi plays in Maratha rulers in 20th century Goa. Also, his MA dissertation at Ambedkar University examined theatre. Mr. Naik has also presented at international conferences, written for the Caravan, and played a role as a columnist tackling problems and topics like the theatre, language, politics, and migration. His work has been presented at the Serendipity Arts Festival, and he has also received various fellowships. Beyond that, he also helps and mentors students from the underrepresented communities, guiding them through higher education. So now please join me in welcoming our guest for today, Mr. Kaustubh Naik. So, as I mentioned earlier, before moving into the world of performance, you pursued your education in computer science. How did that happen? Was it a typical Indian story where brown parents were like, "Nahi, mera beta engineer hi banega"? Was it something similar, or was it an entirely different story?
First of all, good afternoon and good morning, everybody. And sorry for this got delayed. Yeah, just to respond to your question, it was not the usual story. My parents were quite liberal, and they let me and my sister choose what we wanted to study. There was no pressure. It's just that my uncle was a professor of computer science, and like he traveled a lot to countries abroad, like in Japan, Italy, and whatever. And his students are also like placed in all over the world. He used to teach at Goa University. So I thought, okay, this computer science is something that lets you travel, because my whole point was to like travel on other people's money. So, that's why I actually ended up in computer science. I did my bachelor's in Chogles, went for my master's in Pune, and then in Pune I realized I couldn't like pursue computer science as a thing for rest of my life, because I had always had varied interests, literature, theatre, music, films, and you name it. And then I realized, okay, like I can't do this. So then I was trying to find what else I can do. And thus I encountered this program in Delhi, in JNU. And then I applied to JNU that year. I did not get in, but I got into an MA program in different university at Ambedkar University, which had just started then. So I did my MA at Ambedkar, then I did my MPhil. So the MPhil PhD integrated program, but I finished MPhil and then went for my PhD abroad. So my research has also evolved over the period. Like I started looking at popular performance cultures, like popular theatre in Goa, like looking at theatre, for example, and what are its political sort of implications for Goa and how historically it has evolved. Then I realized, okay, theatre tells us one story, and because it's so rooted in the Goan Catholic sort of milieu. So what is the counter to that? Not counter, but was a parallel sort of theatrical culture. Then I realized the Goan Hindus have this whole tradition of like staging plays at temples during festivals. So that's where so that was part 2 of my research that happened at JNU. And then I realized, okay, these questions are fine, but there's something very deeper about Goan history that one needs to research about, which is connected with land and language and stuff. So that's how I then evolved this current research project. I took a gap of a year and then applied for a PhD, and then I went to the US. Yeah, so that's like in short.
Okay.
But like, yeah, my parents were absolutely fine with like, even if I had gone for like arts, they would have not minded.
So it was your decision, basically.
Yeah.
Okay. So as you said, you were
more than my decision, my confusion. I think it's also like it's very criminal to expect people who just like kids
Stick
who
to
like
one thing,
not
yeah.
stick to one thing, also like somebody who's done a graduation, to let them decide like once and for all like this is what you have to do for rest of your life. I've always explored my interests, and thankfully my parents allowed that. I mean, not everybody has that kind of privilege, but I was fortunate to do that. So it's mostly like from my confusions I've started, not like when you say decision, it feels like I was very determined to do this. I've just found my way here. Yeah.
Okay, so as you said, you just realized that computer science is not the path you would want to walk on, and it's more of drama and playwright. So has being a playwright ever influenced your academic style of writing, or maybe have tempted you to add some dramatic dialogues in theses anytime?
No, you actually the worst thing about writing thesis is you can't write dramatic things in it.
But has it ever
It's
tempted
like
you?
legal language. No, you can't write something which is like so. You can't write a lot of adverbs in it. You have to be very precise in what you frame, right? But my academic interest has always influenced my playwriting. I was just telling your principal that some of the at least two of the plays I wrote are based on court cases.
Yeah.
Because court cases give you like a lot of interesting material. It's very dramatic in that sense. So yeah, it's the reverse. So most because I study history, all my plays are around historical themes. The recent play that I did was actually about a trial of a slave who was brought to Goa during Inquisition. So we found that material in Lisbon, and then we made a play out of it. So yeah, basically that was part of my academic research, but that featured into my playwriting as such.
Okay, great. So now talking about the university, why is it only UPenn and not something else?
I mean, I just got into UPenn. There's nothing.
So,
There's no
so
secret for that. I applied to 3 universities.
yeah.
I was rejected from one, Chicago. I was waitlisted at Georgetown, and I got admission at UPenn, and that's how you. I mean, people sometimes get through multiple universities, and they have to make a choice between them. What's a good city? Which university is paying you better? But for me, it was just like a straight choice.
So is there any advice you want to give the audience if they are willing to pursue PhD? I mean, any specific college they should prefer? What are the research they have to do before getting into one of the colleges?
See, some things that you need to take care is like what is your research area, okay, and then you need to find out who would be the right people to do that research with, because you're going to spend at least 5 years with that one person, one supervisor. You're going to spend those many years in one city, and American cities can be really boring. Like there are some cities which are like there's nothing apart from the university there. Like most of these big universities, barring like exceptions of like Penn or Columbia, which are situated in like bigger cities like Philadelphia or New York. Some of these universities are situated in very far off places, and it's just the university there. There's nothing else in that city. So you need to like spend those many years. So you need to decide a lot of other factors also. Who's a better supervisor? Probably he might or she might not be the best supervisor, or there are these celebrity professors that everybody wants to work with. But some of them are very terrible as supervisors because they are always traveling. They don't have the time to supervise you. I mean, your point is to get a good supervision, work with them, learn how the craft of writing, craft of making an argument. These are the skills you need to learn, and it's not easy to find. It's almost like finding a life partner in a sense that after 5 years you are almost wedded to this person, and terrible things happen when people sort of have differences with the supervisor. They lose interest in their thesis. I'm not like discouraging you, but I'm just saying like these things also matter. So one is obviously college, like in the university, because sitting here, I keep telling these people who apply to PhD programs in the US. But sitting here, you don't realize the qualitative difference between, let's say, Harvard and UT Austin. but the way they treat you as a student is very different. So at Penn, for example, if I have to travel for a conference, I get some funding every semester, which I don't have to like compete for it. I just apply and I get that money. Even if I have to just go and attend the conference, even if I'm not presenting in it, if it's important for my professionalization, they will give me money to go and attend it. But let's say some smaller universities who don't have that kind of resources, there will be like a competition. So all of you apply and one of you will get it, which is kind of like it's not correct. Making everybody compete every time. But America sort of thrives on this. But like bigger universities have because they have more money, they have that kind of money at disposal. Okay, you go take some $600 and go travel this conference. That's what I mean. For example, for my research, I had to study Portuguese, and our university does have a Portuguese training professor, but he like the Portuguese that they teach in America is mostly Brazilian, and I had to learn like the European Portuguese. So they sent me to Lisbon for 7 months, and they don't think twice about these things. So they're like, go, like it's important for you, you should go. So some of the like if you go to better universities, you also get access to this kind of resources, which is like very unmatched anywhere else. I've studied in public universities in India and like these private big universities in the US. One thing is like the disparity of resources really sort of makes a difference. So because now let's say somebody who's doing a PhD in Goa University or in JNU for example, would not have the resources to go to Lisbon and do archival work, but I have. So inadvertently the thesis that I will produce will be not better I would say, but like at least it will have material that this person will not have access to. So like I'm already placed ahead in that race. It's unfair, but that's the world is unfair. So yeah. So.
Yeah, so as you mentioned earlier, America is thriving on competition basically to get funds, to give funds, but for some students it's not possible. So, what advice do you have on managing the financial aids or maybe getting through?
See, PhD, like I think 90% of PhDs in America are funded. They're funded for 5 years or 4 or 5 years, whatever the uh, duration is. Like arts and sciences PhDs are for 5 years. I think graduate school, the education PhDs are for 4. So I think is the law PhD. They have a different name for that. But most of them will fund you. PhD is always funded, and that's why I would suggest people that if don't go for like masters abroad, because masters for the universities abroad are like a cash cow. They will charge you for courses that they offer anyways to PhD students or to undergrads. Um, so between a master, probably do a master's in India. There are much better universities to do masters in India than in abroad. But PhDs are always funded, most of them, and they're funded for 5 years with your additional funding for research visits and whatever. So I don't think, at least for PhD, funding could be a major
problem,
issue.
yeah.
But the thing is, the intake is very less. If masters, so the batch of masters would be let's say for 20 people, a PhD intake would be like 3 people every year. Like when I got in, there were only 2 people who were admitted, and I got my offer letter just like 3 weeks before COVID, and so I confirmed my admission. The other person did not, but they did not offer it to anybody else. So I was the only student who got in. Subsequently, there are 2 or 3 students have come in my department, and this is a smaller department. Let's say South Asia Studies is a smaller department. Somebody like history would take like some 10 to 15 students a year. English departments are slightly bigger, so they take depends on which like what department, how much funding they have. But PhDs are funded through and through. Very rarely that you would have a PhD offer, and they wouldn't make you an offer if they can't fund you. If they don't have the budget to fund you for 5 years, they will not make you an offer. So that's that. So PhDs are usually
Yeah,
funded.
it's
Yeah.
just not academic, but we also need to consider other aspects as well, right? I mean, staying for 5 years, it's a pretty long period. So,
Yeah,
what
yeah.
about that? How do you manage that?
It is really taxing. I've stayed outside Goa for like more than 10 years now. I went to do my masters in Pune and then Delhi. So Pune and Delhi I've stayed fair bit. But again, this is a different country. You are it's like in the environment only you realize that you don't belong here in some sense because the country is very differently sort of organized. You have to do a lot of work on your own. Basic things like because there's also like America is also interesting in ways that the dignity of labor there is like really high. Things that we take because of our social inequality, things we assume to be cheap here are not so cheap in America. So you are also like triggered to do your own work. So our weekends are almost spent in like clearing the kitchen, cooking, doing the laundry and taking the snow out and whatever. So it's like, but that's an experience that you'll have, and I think you can't trade it for anything else. I was just talking to somebody yesterday, this daughter of a friend of mine, and she's a bit scared to go outside to study because she's like, I've never been outside Goa. What will I do? Because in Goa, we are also pampered in many ways. Sushegat, yeah. When I used to return from Delhi, my aunts would gather and say, Baba, woman, meta duga. Like, they're concerned about like fish. And sometimes it's very interesting that their whole concern is about fish, and they don't really care. I mean, they don't. It's not care. I'm sure they do, but like they don't bother about what you're doing there, how you're surviving, or like how is your study going on, what is your research about. No, they're like, do you get proper fish? Is like the basic question they'll ask you. America is very bad for fish, I must say. But your question was again like stay. Yeah,
The AIDS, yeah.
yeah, and it is very individualistic society. People are on their own. At least when you like, because when you come to a level where it's a PhD program, people are much like, people are like beyond 25, 26. So they are very, like American society is very individualistic. It's, this kind of forming of groups, going for a chai or a drink after a lecture is very rare. So if you ask our American colleagues, would you want to meet? They'll say, okay, on the third Tuesday of the next month, let's meet for a coffee at 11 a.m. And that's it. They won't invite you for like, I mean, it's a very different way of socializing. I'm not criticizing them. But again, now there's, because most of these universities have a sizable population of Indian students or South Asian students in general, you also tend to form these groups. So back in like Philadelphia, because many of my colleagues in other PhD programs are also from universities like JNU, DU, and like there's some shared connection all of us have. So you form these groups and like try to create a sense of home there. But it's very challenging to like be focused on research while you're trying to be in touch with your family here, and especially during COVID it was really difficult. I spent 6-7 months of COVID in Philly doing my first semester of my PhD, and it was really difficult to sort of keep a track of things that are happening. I lost few family members, but you can't come and see them, and it takes a toll on you. But I think it also makes you immune to it at the end of the day. Now when I come back to Goa, I can't stay here beyond a week. So, yeah, so that's also there. You also get used to that idea of staying by yourself and doing your things on your own. Yeah, I don't know if I've answered your question properly.
Yeah, somewhat. I mean, the question was about the how do you manage the financial.
Oh, I mean okay. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So the stipend pays you enough to survive in the city that it is. If you are lucky, and if you're in some of these bigger universities like Penn, Harvard, you're also able to save up some money for future use or whatever. So it's not badly paid. It's not a badly paying fellowship. But obviously, if you compare with your contemporaries who have gone into jobs directly, for example, like I had a friend, she's part Indian, part American, and she was doing law directly. She was doing her master's in law. and she wanted to do PhD, and she's like, my colleagues are earning like $90,000 a year, and like PhD won't pay you that much. It pays you like one third of it. But getting into a job is like there's a steep rise in your salary. But doing PhD is like, it's almost like a bare minimum what you require to survive in the city, and do like you can survive with like one additional member. So if I have to take my wife there, that's still an okay salary that you will probably earn, but nothing beyond that. Like you can't splurge, and like because rents are also high, other other amenities also cost that much. So most people, like, we usually prefer staying with another roommate. Or there are in some of these American houses are also big. They are like 3-story houses which have like 4 or 5 rooms. There are 5 people staying in a house. I was a bit too old to have live with other 4 people, so I decided I'll just stay with one person. That's how you share costs and whatever. But the stipend pays you enough to like. Um, but again, if you talk to people in West Coast, for example, in University of California and all, these are state universities, and California, the state, is a very expensive state. So the cost of living there is very much because they don't have proper public transport. So you have to also have a car. That adds to your costs. So my friends who study there have slight problems in like managing with the funding that they have, because it's slightly lesser to like survive. But these are disparities of the universities and the cities that they are in. Philly is not an expensive city. It's not an expensive city as New York is or Boston is, but it's not as cheap as like something like Maine would be like.
So it's manageable.
Yeah, it's manageable. I mean, yeah, it's not bad. I mean, I'm not. It's
Yeah,
not
and
like.
from what I have read before, it's like they also provide for on-campus jobs, I guess.
Yeah. So basically, your PhD is tied with some form of teaching. Some universities have teaching that, so you will get paid as long as you keep teaching. For example, at Penn, I get funded for 5 years. I have to teach only for 2 years. So for rest of the 3 years, because you can't teach and also do your research, because research is a very slow, long process. You can't be running in and out of classes because you would also prepare for classes. So in one class there would, if you're lucky, you're like 20, 30, 40 students. To grade everybody's papers, weekly responses, this, that. Amidst that, you can't also keep up doing your research. I mean, you will find time, but it's lesser. So we have to teach only for 2 years, and the rest of the 3 years is for our research or whatever. If you go to Princeton, for example, they don't have teaching for PhD. If it's voluntary, if you want to teach, you get paid extra. We have to teach for 2 years. If we teach beyond 2 years, we also get paid extra. So if you can manage that, and if you need some extra money, you can always offer a course and earn some extra money. Usually PhD students are not advised to do like on-campus jobs because they already are part of the university.
Yeah.
It's a weird position, like technically also we are students, but we are also workers of the university. So that is the loophole that they are finding, and they're forming unions of PhD students. And this is a thing now. In last few years, so many universities have had PhD student unions where they bargain for like better facilities, better pay, better care for your dependents, insurance for your partner, like a wife or husband, a crash for your kids and stuff like that. So these things are coming up. And the university obviously opposes this, but these are things that are being negotiated. But you are like in a way part of the university employee as well. I was just talking to another friend who's at Washington, and she told, so there is like, I don't know if you guys know that there is a lot of funding cut that is happening in America right now, as a result of which all the universities are also in shock, because the kind of funding that they would receive would be distributed in various channels. So now if that's cut, so they don't know what to do and how to fund PhD, how to fund essentially themselves. So the first axis come on the graduate students. So admissions of PhD students are lesser. Funding we might get would be lesser. Um, so I was talking to her and she said, okay, usually their funding is associated with her teaching every year. So she gets a teaching assistant position or a research assistant position with a professor, and that's how they survive. But now her supervisor has told her that next year the TA-ship looks very difficult, so you need to find something else for funding, and she's in panic right now. But at least at Penn, we don't have these problems, but we have other problems. Problems are different, but this uncertainty is there. But again, yeah. So just to come back to the question, PhD students are not necessarily given jobs. They would prefer master students who are doing, because they have time and they don't have other sort of what do you say, other commitments in the university. They don't. So basically, most of the campus jobs are given to mostly master students. PhD students are not necessarily. It's not like you can't do it, but the preference is mostly for master students.
Okay, so since the schedule is a bit less hectic, you can say.
Yeah,
Okay.
PhD schedule is very hectic, I must say.
Yeah, so how do you find, I mean, how do you escape the academic pressure? You have you have spoken about the grading and the holding of lectures. It gets too much. So how do you deal with it?
I think you just deal with it.
I mean,
There is-
even as students of law or maybe in any field, we need something to deal with.
I was just
when-
going to say that, as lawyers also probably you have a lot of pressures when you start working, as a junior, the pay is less, the work is more. Like I have lawyer friends, so I know these things. But again, initially I did not do this, but now in between each semester we have like a break for a week. There's a spring break, there's a fall break. So now we sometimes rent a car and drive somewhere for like 3-4 days, come back. So that's the only way you can do it. And the other thing is like I picked up cooking as a thing. So I cook almost every day. Between me and my roommate, we used to alternate between cooking. But on weekends, we would usually cook like big, like more essentially, than invite few friends over for lunch or dinner, and that is the only way you can. Because initially, I used to read a lot for leisure, but now for your PhD, you read so much that again on Saturday you can't be like taking a book and like for time pass you can't be reading. There are people find ways to do things. Like I had a friend, a senior of mine. She had joined the choir in the church on the campus. So she used to go for choir practice. People go for swimming. People do all sorts of things. The graduate student office also organizes events for you. Like they will. I went for a knitting course once actually, and I thought I would seriously pick up that as a hobby, because you can knit while also reading, but I couldn't. There are many things that they do there, but it's just like you have to have really solid sense of time management, which I don't. Like I start very well. By the end of the semester, I was like, okay, mistake, I can't push myself any further. But you cannot, like, for one course, you have to read at least like 2 books and like allied articles, and you have at least 3 to 4 courses every semester. So you can multiply that into 4. And if you're teaching, you're also reading. Like I was teaching a course on Indian philosophy that had like 40 students in class, and they would weekly they would send in responses to the reading. So I have to read all of it, I have to grade it. It takes a toll, and you have no sense of holidays. There's no Sunday. There is no. But sometimes you just have to like do it, like just like I'm not like, for example, here we don't have it, that culture pretty much. But if you send an email to somebody on Friday evening till Monday morning, they will not respond. We send emails to anybody on Saturday, Sunday, and you are expected to respond. There, people don't respond. People don't pick up your calls because those days are for their own leisure. Um, and other thing is like as teaching assistants, we also have to conduct something called as office hours. So we meet with students like to individually help them with some difficulties, and it was like such a revealing experience for me because students would come with all sorts of problems, and I think it's also like a generational gap. It's I was telling Ramrai the other day, I just fail to understand your generation at some point. You know,
We ourselves fail to understand that sometimes.
no, it's
What about me?
but no, it's not like I'm saying ki you guys are like whatever useless. I'm just trying like probably we were in a different. So like when the students come, like I had this one student, she came in and she used to be very quiet in class. Okay, so she came in for some. It was mandatory for everybody to show up for office hours at least once. So she came in, and I was asking her questions, and at some point she started crying. And like I am not trained.
Counselor.
Yeah, I'm not. Yeah, exactly. I'm not trained to do that. I know my training is in something else, but here you also have to deal with like students' own problems because obviously they won't tell the faculty. But there are again resources within the university, and there are mental health resources in the university. So as my responsibility ideally would be to report this girl's behavior, like that she probably needs some more attention to the mental health cell, and then they will take care of it obviously. But sometimes it's just like one-off thing that girls felt that I think I don't belong here, I'm stupid, I don't know why I'm in this big university, or and I'm just trying to like tell her no, but like this is also part of your research. Okay, you just don't study what you are you just don't study there because you're put into this teaching position. You also have to deal with students and their problems because they might be comfortable opening up their problems to you because you are more closer in terms of age and like position. You're not as powerful as the professor, so they feel free to sort of like unload their stresses on you, and that's also one thing that you realize the part of this. Yeah, everybody is like traumatized in some sense, I guess.
Yeah, okay, so speaking about the escape, does playwright, theatre, performance, does it play any role? I mean, how do you channelize your creativity amidst all this?
No, this is, I mean, see, the playwriting is not an escape. It's almost like writing like a thesis, because you do, as I said, I work on like historical events or like court cases, for example. So you read through it, you analyze that material, then you fit it into like a scene or a dialogue. So for me, like playwriting is equally stressful as like writing a paper. Sometimes I think writing a paper is less stressful than writing a play, because this you can take your time, but playwriting has like because it's dependent on other people. There are actors waiting to read those lines. There's a whole team that is involved in making a play. So if you get delayed, everything gets delayed. So there's an additional pressure. Paper writing, because you do it in your like, you can always give that excuse. Research takes time, and you have to synthesize more information. So there is slightly more window of taking time here, but not necessarily. Yeah. So playwriting for me is not an escape. Actually, it's very stressful in some sense. But yeah, but I think I read a lot even outside my research, and that probably sometimes is, or you go watch a film. There are like good film societies and theaters in Philly where you can watch films for very cheap. So that's something you would do as escape, I guess.
Okay, so it's okay. Even if it's more pressurizing and stressful, but it's something that brings you pleasure, right?
Yeah, yeah. Once you see
More
the
than the thesis.
yeah, yeah. Once you see the play on stage, and if it's good, then you'll obviously feel okay. You have done something worthwhile. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So you earlier had mentioned in the discussion that American countries, they have a very individualist environment. So JNU, from what I have known about JNU, it is very politically
Yeah.
active. The campaigns, the protests going on from there, transitioning into a very different environment, that is UPenn. The cultural shock must obviously have been a blast. So how did you deal with it? And also, what is that one research culture which you found to be a bit shocking? I mean,
In
yeah.
America, see, I will say this about JNU. People have all sorts of opinions about JNU thanks to our media, but it's. I've traveled fairly in European countries, in China, elsewhere, and I've seen universities. And actually, whenever I visit, I try to visit a university, and I don't think JNU is any lesser. Like it's a university that has the kind of resources that probably every university and college should have, and a lot of those resources have come up as a part of student protests. For example, still you can find uh, you can go to one of these canteens and eat like a good meal for 50 rupees. And why you can do that? Because the canteens are subsidized, because they know that the kind of students who come to a place like JNU, they don't come from very affluent families. We had friends whose parents were like, they were cart pullers. They would sell vegetables on the cart, and that kid has gone to become an IAS officer or a professor. And you had seen this kind of transformation in front of your eyes in JNU. So that's something I really hold dear about JNU. And there are some problems also. Like I'm sure like each institution has its own problems. But yeah, as you said, the politicization that you would feel in JNU, for example, was not there. But again, I don't know if you guys were following the Israel-Palestine conflict that happened. Um, a lot of American universities actually came out in protests, and they suffered for it. Actually, now the Trump government has put an injunction that if you were part of a protest, your student visas will be revoked. I know it to that extent, because there is the geopolitics of it is quite deeply embedded in American system. So there is a culture of protest, but it's not as good as JNU, I would say. Their protests are very boring. We would just go there and like, the protest बहुत boring है. Because there's a different way of protesting. But and obviously because they have a different vocabulary, a different history of protest in America than what is it in JNU. But what I love about American universities is their library. The kind of library facility that they have is just unmatched. I just keep giving these two examples I'll give. So when I got my admission, I was still here and I was interacting with like faculty and this, that. So the library has a South Asia collections person, so who looks after like acquiring of books related to South Asia, India, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, whatever. He emailed me saying, I heard that you are joining the department. Would you please tell me about your research so that we can buy books that will be required for you? I said, okay. So then I told him about my research. Then I wanted to work on the history of Konkani language. So I told him, okay, this is my research. I'm looking at broader peninsular Indian interaction with languages, Sanskrit, Marathi, Konkani, whatever. So in response, he said, okay, yeah, he said our collection of Konkani books is modest 900 titles. Marathi we have a fairly wide collection. And I told him that some of the Goan libraries wouldn't have 900 Konkani books in their live collection. And he was like, okay, if you want more books and if you want us to acquire any periodicals, journals, please tell us, we'll do it on your behalf. And this is even before I've stepped in the country. There is still 6 months for me to even like join my program, but they are already preparing for my time there and my period that I will spend researching. Second thing was that I was looking for a specific book about a community here in Goa. They had converted from Christianity to Hinduism back in the 20th century. So there's a book that I found, but that book was in a library in Los Angeles, and they have a system where I can request it from Philadelphia, which is at the other end of the country, and they flew that book for me, and I could keep that book for like 2 months and then return it. This kind of resources is just like unmatchable. I can locate a book in any university in the US, and they'll get it for me. Because I'm not really, I don't know if you guys know this. America has one of the largest collection of Indian books because of this scheme called as the PL 480, which, so when India was just like independent and not very rich, we were importing wheat from America. And in exchange of that wheat, we gave them books from India. So the deal was that Indian government will give a consortium. There were 7 libraries. To them, India gave 7 copies of each and every book published in each and every language in India for a very long period. And some of those books are not available in India anymore, but they are there in the US. So actually, it's very strange that if somebody who's working on, let's say, their PhD on Indian literature, for example, the books are already there. You don't even have to come here and like do that research. You can still sit in your library and do that. So and that is something it really shocked me, the scale at which those libraries operate, and the ease with which they, because their whole idea is that the students would use this material. No, it's like if it's a rare book, it's not like they're going to hide it. They would rather make it more accessible through scanning, digital print, whatever, like, they'll make the digital copies available. Yeah, so that is something I really appreciate that culture of US research community.
Yeah, and also what about the academic culture? I mean the hierarchy. How is it? Is it too rigid, too flexible? How
I
what do
think
they say about
on the top of it is really flexible. I mean, what does flexible mean actually? You can call your professor by their first name, or like just like, but we are not used to it. It
How
takes
would you compare it to the Indian culture of academics? I mean the research.
Um, Indian culture is more complex. I would rather say that, but but I'm not going to say that American culture is not hierarchical. They also have their own problems, but they are not same problems here. Here there is like, for example, in JNU also, I knew that like some students had problems with the supervisor because the supervisor will just like plagiarize these people's research. That is something you will not find in the US. Or for example, in many universities, I met few students who have done the research and they published. The co-author is the supervisor who has done zero work. And I was like, why did you agree to that? He's like, no, there's a rule that whenever I publish, the supervisor gets the co-author. And I was like, no, it's not a rule. You can't be fooled like this. But like things like plagiarism, for example, are taken very seriously in US system because there are checks and balances to like you can't even by mistake include something that is plagiarized or whatever, because it will show up and then you will be called for explanation. And I've seen cases where students have been expelled at undergrad level, at master's level, even PhD level also. But some here in, let's say in India, there's also like a personal component associated with your research supervisor and you, which may or may not be there in America, for example. You meet your professor for like a stipulated period, you discuss, and then you don't care about what that professor is doing in his or her life or whatever. But here, that's probably not the case sometimes. You see, like, there is this old Jaspal Bhatti skit where we're talking about that, this PhD student is taking vegetables for his supervisors and taking his kids to school. Like that kind, I mean, probably it used to happen at some point, but I'm sure it happens in some ways. Also, the social inequality of like all like caste, class, gender. I think these things are slightly more contentious in India, and they're not as bad in America, I would say. Like which student, like which supervisor will take which student. These things are also decided by these other social factors that sometimes you are blind to. But I have not found that in it's there. I'm not going to say like there is like a very tense relation between the racial sort of discrimination in the US because it's mostly populated by dominant white sort of fraternity. It's changing slowly, but that tension still exists, and there are people who still still have those kind of behaviors with like people from other racial groups, for example. There's one actually. There's a law professor at UPenn who's very famous, who's very conservative and like has made some of the most obnoxious comments about South Asian students or black students or East Asian students vis-a-vis their race. But you can't like she's not been like usually if you said something like that, to that effect in India, you would probably get suspended. But in America, you don't get suspended for these things. Yeah.
Well, so the recently enacted NEP, what views do you have on that? I mean, they are trying to make Indian education system more practical. It looks fancy in the papers, but when you get a real hand experience, what are your views on that?
See, I mean, it's interesting because what all this time we had the kind of higher education system, especially. I wouldn't talk about schools
No,
because
the higher, yeah.
yeah. Very similar to the system that was there in the UK. Okay, individual colleges which form a cluster, and then there's a cluster university. So like Oxford University has smaller colleges in it. So for example, same like Dhembe College, Chogule College form part of Goa University, which was the model that even India adopted. Now what they're doing with the NEP is they're trying to slowly Americanize that model. So you have a 4-year undergrad program. You can quit and like you can exit anytime, making it more industry oriented. So basically, you are creating labor force for the industry. The old UK sort of idea of education was this nourishing of the soul and mind or whatever. That is slowly going away. So I find this is responding to some sort of like an industrial demand, and the kind of things that they are trying to put here. See, for in America, there is one university, okay, University of Pennsylvania, and then there are schools in it. But I can take a course in engineering school also, or an engineering student can take a course in my school because it's also one campus. But the problem right now with NEP implementation is, so they are saying that an MBBS student can take a course in music, but the MBBS college is in Bambuli, the music college is in Altin. So there is a logistical sort of a problem that they need to bridge, which we are not ready as an infrastructure. We don't have that infrastructure. So for example, somebody from like Chogule College, if he has to take a course in Fine Arts College, how are you going to resolve that problem? Are you going to send a professor there? But what if there's only one student who wants to take it? Are you going to deny that student because then it's his right, or her right? So infringing upon their right, but you can't say कि मैं एक student के लिए I'm going to send a professor because so there are a lot of these questions that the government has not thought through. I think by the time from their announcement of the NEP to this period, which is I think significantly like 4 or 5 years now, they should have thought about it. But I don't think that. Probably what they need to do is now create universities or integrate existing universities into a new system which will facilitate this kind of research. But I don't know to what extent that will be possible. Because I don't think our policies are guided by experts at this point. So, yeah.
So, well, the last question for today.
Okay.
We in our leisure time often think about the ifs and buts. I mean, what if I had chosen another path? What if I had not taken that decision but something else? So, what decision or what advice would you give to your younger self?
You know what, like this will sound like I'm pandering to an audience because I'm at a law college, but much later I realized I could have just become a lawyer. It's not that I have a thing for arguing. I would be very shy if I have to go to a court, but like the kind of power that you guys have as a lawyer or as a judge or whatever, or like just knowing the system in and out, that itself really fascinates me. And so a part of my research is actually on like legal history, because that's probably the closest I would come to study law. But I have often wondered that I should have become a lawyer and applied for like a justice job or whatever. Yeah, if probably it will just sound very, but I'm not lying. I'm really saying this out of my heart, that I really thought that I could have become a lawyer. But apart from that, yeah, I maybe the other advice I keep giving is, if I was focused more back in my 20s, I could have saved on some time that I like spent doing like 3 years of masters, then a gap year, then another master's, this, that, and finally found my way. But if I had like I had really responded to my intuitions and taken decisions on based on that, and not coming through like peer pressure because whatever, I could have probably doing the same thing probably at the earlier stage in my life. Yeah, that's the advice. But I'm also serious about being a lawyer.
You can still get the degree, I mean, if you wish
Well,
to.
I have accumulated too many degrees now, so I don't want to do one more.
Oh, well, that's it for today.
Thank you so much.
No, we're still open for questions
Okay,
from
yeah,
the
yeah.
audience.
Yeah, I was thinking
There's
of-
always more to ask.
Yes,
So, I have a question.
please.
Okay,
Please
so,
introduce yourself and.
okay, so I'm Sharanya Chodankar. I'm from
Hi.
first year BA LL.B.
Okay.
And my question to you is, it is said that your environment influences your behaviors, okay, or actions. To what extent do you think it's true compared to your life here and life abroad?
It is in some sense, because let's say here, let's compare Goa and like America. Like, let's keep Delhi out. In Goa, like we are very community-driven people. We have this thing of like, okay, visiting our relatives, neighbors, friends, this, that. There is some sort of like community outreach that we keep doing. It's very different in America. You can't arrive at people's doorstep without telling them. And sometimes you feel, I mean, it's just like, it's like if you're going there, if you want to meet them, you have to call them, ask if they are free. If you're calling people for like dinner, you have to ask them if they have any allergies, this, that. Like, it's so much of like formality. A lot of this social interaction in America is guided through these formalities. And also that society is designed to be negotiated as an individual. Okay, so if you go there, there are machines. Okay, like for example, laundry. Okay, and it's sometimes I realize they've dumbed it down also, because Americans are not the smartest people on the planet. So when when I was staying in an apartment, the apartment had a laundry on each floor. So it would go, and then usually our washing machines have so many controls, right? There is this, that, hot water, cold water, whatever. There are like two things. There is one washer, one dryer, and these have to press one button. You put like a coin, one button, washing. You wait, then the clothes go into the other. You put one button, it dries. So like so basically you don't have to interact with people. Like there are people who will just like, there's one guy who will just do one job, and essentially their whole society is designed to cut down on social interactions. So even if you are like living in a neighborhood, they don't have a sense of like community there. I have seen so the apartment that I lived for 3 years, there are 6 apartments. I have hardly met one of my neighbor twice, and that's it. Like, at least in like when I was living in Delhi or in Goa, you can't like, you need these people around for any help. But in America, you can just go by just doing your own thing. So I think that's like a big difference there, and that is what I miss actually. That whole sense of community that we have here. If anything happens, like I remember somebody very close to me passed away when I was in America. And who do you go and tell, or like share this? But then there were friends who called, like there are friends of mine where you can go to their house at like 11 in the night for a cup of tea. And these are only like Indian or Pakistani friends that I have there. But you can't do this with your white friends, for example. So, the closeness that you will have with some of these people will also be limited. So, that is one thing I feel that, that we are very community driven here, and that's a very individualistic society. So even when I am there, I prefer, like, I somehow tend to become that kind of person, that I will have very minimal interactions. Most of the time I interact with my roommate. On weekends we go out for like dinner or whatever, but that's it. Like, you do your thing and you just like be to yourself. Like last month I felt sick. A lot of my relatives came to see me, and but you won't do that in America. If you get admitted to hospital, you are also alone there. Anyways, you can't, there was one of our friend who was admitted and we wanted to meet him, and the hospital said you can't meet him, and he was there just alone. But we as a community feel like, okay, we need to reach out to him, we should be around him, but they are not used to this kind of social protocols. I'm not saying it's bad, it's just different. And so then you tend to sort of follow that. But it's also there are people very different. One thing I found there, whenever people cross you, they smile at you. And I used to get really why they don't know me, why are they smiling at me, why are they opening? They also it's not that they are very rude people. They're very courteous, they'll hold the door for you, this, that. But it's a very weird sort of connection. I don't know if I've entirely responded to your question, but there's a different way of functioning in those cities.
Any more questions? Yeah.
I'm Nerita and I'm also from the first year of VMSCL.
Okay.
So I want to ask about how you manage between your academics and your personal life. Would you say that academics had put a pressure on you to give up on some of your hobbies?
Yeah. No, when you're there, it just takes a toll. What I managed, I was also my partner was living in Delhi. So we were also doing a long distance relation, and that's also one thing, doing PhDs abroad is where's your partner, and what things are happening. So that really sort of was the test for 3 years. I was in America, she was here, and it does take a lot of, because it's not just that you are in two different cities, you're also in two different time zones. So by the time you are awake in the morning, it was my wife's time to go to bed. So we are in different moods altogether. So things sort of are challenging, but the kind of pressure it puts you, the demand it places on you of rigor or whatever, it really sort of sucks out any you can't be relaxed about anything, especially when you're doing coursework, because you're doing coursework, you're attending courses, you're also teaching, and you're also improving, you're working on your proposal, because at the end of your coursework you also have to present your proposal, defend. And one thing I forgot to tell you, why American PhDs are unique in that sense. We have something called as the comprehensive exams, where you choose 3 fields and you read some 70 to 80 books in those fields. These are books that have defined the discipline. For example, legal, if I take legal history as one topic, I'll have to read the classic books in legal history. I'll have to read contemporary scholarship. So you make a list of 70, 80 books like this for 3 subjects. So you're reading almost close to 200 books and papers, and you read that and you write 3 essays. You write 3 essays synthesizing all that material, and then you go to a committee and then they ask you questions about those fields. Okay, if you tell them, okay, they'll tell you, okay, how has this field changed in last 50 years, and then you are supposed to answer. Because I have often found that when we do research here, we are very focused on what are our research areas. For example, if let's say I'm doing my PhD on tenancy law in Goa, okay, I don't have to necessarily know what are what is something like civil law in Goa, for example, whatever. I am just focused on this one particular area. But in America, they don't so my field of research is like Portuguese Empire in Goa. But so my exams are on colonialism, caste and land. So there are three fields that I have a fair bit of idea how they evolved, like, like what are the theories of colonialism that evolved? How does colonialism in India look different from, let's say, Spanish America, like Latin America, for example? This is all what I have to read. It may or may not be related to my research, but I have to read it because when I do teach, I have to offer these broad courses. I can't teach American students, okay, what happened in 18th century Goa. No, I have to teach them broader courses where I have to teach, okay, colonialism, like, so a survey of colonialism from like 1498 to 1961 or whatever, like, like a big 300-400 years of like survey. So you have to, they prepare you for that essentially. Your research is just part of your thesis is just part of your PhD, but that's not the entire thing. What they're training you in a discipline, where you have broader sense of what the discipline is. So that is what makes American PhDs slightly more different and slightly more rigorous also. So to that effect, like last semester that I was there, I did 2 courses. I did these 3 lists of around like 200 books and TA'd for 1 course. So I was doing these 5 different things at one point, and it's not easy, I would say. So it does sort of, you have to then make adjustments or like sacrifices. You couldn't go for like this something, can't talk to people every day or whatever. Like these things are, you have to make that sort of personal sacrifice at some point. But once the coursework is over, probably it's slightly lesser demanding because then you don't have to go to classes unless you're teaching. You can just sit in the library and work on your stuff. Yeah, that's that.
Any more questions? Anyone would like to ask or anything?
So I have one more question.
Please.
So you said you like to read for leisure, you would read for leisure. So what is the one author or one book that you resonated with the most, or something that you would recommend us also to read?
One author.
Yeah. One or two just that you resonated with the most.
What language do you want?
Any language, sir. Provided it's the 4 languages that we know.
It's very difficult to like take one author, but see, for leisure I used to do a lot of Marathi reading because it is like I can read Marathi much quicker than English, and it's easy. It's not like academic, heavy jargon or whatever. So just before bed I would read. So like my current favorite writers are like this guy called Vilas Sarang and other guy called Jayant Pawar. Both of these are short, like story writers, and they write these almost magical realism kind of works. So that is something I would suggest. If you want to read poetry, there's this Portuguese poet called Fernando Pessoa who wrote this very amazing book called The Book of Disquiet. It's not poetry, it's mostly short, and it's also probably you guys might like it because it's not a long format. Like some of his chapters are like 4 lines, 5 lines, but it's a book, and you can start reading it from anywhere. You don't have a definite beginning or end. So the Book of Disquiet would be something that I would recommend. Yeah, these 2. Not from this side.
So would you like to ask anything?
Oh, nice to meeting you.
So my question is, having seen the American system, what are few changes you would like to have it over? Education.
Yeah. I think the insistence on like reading, I don't know like to what extent our students read anymore. You don't have to smile and looking at them. But I think reading as a practice is just disappearing, which sometimes, I don't know. I don't want to say that of the like always, even my parents' generation thought that our generation would not be reading as much as they read. But because there is something basic that you need to understand about a discipline. Okay, if you're any discipline, law, history, literature, there are something basics that you have to understand. And if you don't read them, you don't realize. And I think American system, what they do is they teach you those, like, okay, these are the texts that you have. If you've done history, you need to know what is history by E.H. Carr, or like, what is the French school of historiography, or what is subaltern studies. You need to know these things. Foundational text. I think that has to be there. And also, like, we need to keep updating our syllabuses. I think the syllabus that is taught, I don't know about like, I don't think we update as frequently as we should. I'm not sure. I don't know about how it works in like discipline like law, for example.
Another system now. I think we are
Yeah.
slowly progressing towards regional autonomy,
Yeah.
which is not there. Universities will have to have regional
Yeah.
skills.
This kind of BOS model is a bit of a.
And American universities don't have these affiliated colleges.
Yeah. I was just telling them. Yeah, yeah.
So therefore, it is if you are updating, it is for your own university. But for us, there are 30, 40 colleges affiliated to one university.
Yeah.
So if you want to change, you have to change for everything.
Yeah.
That's it.
We have got that freedom in syllabus. So recently this year we have updated our syllabus.
Yeah.
Major.
And again, being the Bar Council of India is a regulatory authority.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's what I was saying.
It doesn't allow us to flexible about the courses. Though syllabus is flexible,
Yeah.
but the courses are not flexible. That's another issue. Now, if you look at the American system, the American Bar Association will only conduct bar exam. It doesn't control law colleges. So you teach what you want. I will conduct my exam.
Yeah.
Okay. Now here it is not like that. Bar Council prescribes the subjects and also conducts the exam. If you are conducting the exam, you don't worry about what you teach. Because ultimately whoever wanted to practice has to clear their exam. And in America, clearing bar exam is not easy. Unless you study those 4 courses. Therefore, most of the colleges will offer those 4 courses. But offer much more advanced courses depending upon the
And I've spoken to some of the law students in Penn. I mean, Penn is probably one of the best law schools in America. My God, the kind of stress that, like, you think we have stress. And I was talking to this girl who was in my course for like a course on intellectual history in South Asia, and the kind of like she told me her like day's schedule, and I was like, my God, like, like, please.
No, it's as simple as that. Everyday class you need to read minimum 25 pages.
Yeah.
Minimum 25 pages.
And people also have watched Suits now, so they want to like imagine themselves as.
Suits is nowhere. Okay, what happens in lawyer?
No, it's very interesting now. You get to see these court proceedings on YouTube now. They've become a thing now, and I really like watching them just to see how mundane like a court is. Like because we have this idea about court from Indian films, right? Tariq pe Tariq and whatever. Actually, like this Lawrence Liang has done this PhD on like the depiction of courts in Indian films. He did it at the same department in JNU that I was there. And but when you see these YouTube streams of like courts, I'm like, my God, is this so boring? Yeah, but yeah, any other questions? Yeah.
My question was more about your interest in theatre.
Yeah.
Given you are a playwright and also you're studying Southeast Asian cultures, has there been any works, whether it is plays or otherwise, that has influenced your inclination to Southeast Asian cultures and your study?
South Asian countries. No, I just said like most of my plays have been around like some historical events. 3-4 plays that they all derived from like history. Couple of them actually are on legal cases. So that's where and also like playwriting probably is like one form of making an argument itself. So because you have access to a lot of this scholarly literature, I think your ability to make an argument probably just gets better, and that's it. I don't think it makes you better writer per se, but probably you can bring in an information and level of argument that probably somebody who's not trained in academia, for example, might not be able to bring that kind of. I'm not saying this as a good or bad thing, but just like more reading essentially. At the end of it is we just read and write. Like academia is at the very base level just reading and writing. There's nothing else that there's no mystery around it. It's just the more you read, more you write, more you think, you practice your ability to make an argument, which I think is a similar skill in for lawyers as well, I guess.
Yeah, unfortunately, that focus on writing is very low in India. That's one big issue that we see.
Yeah.
Particularly, another issue that we face is till you complete your 12th standard, they don't allow you to think in schools.
No.
And the moment they come to the law college, we are asking them to think.
Yeah.
So it becomes difficult. Mostly, except few schools, mostly they will mark what is your answer for each question by heart, remember, in fact. When they come here, we are all of a sudden we are telling them, apply. Now the application mind is not developed right from the beginning for us. That's one. The second one is the writing. Writing, we never encourage original writing. We always take somebody's text.
With Chat GPT now, I don't know what is going on.
Even ChatGPT, I don't see, for example, my experience going to American law school, of course, by that time I was a teacher here, I went for Fulbright scholarship. Then all of a sudden we have to write something to submit. Now, ours is not, English is not my mother tongue. But what they did is they gave me an English teacher there, appointed exclusively for the LL.B students whose mother tongue is not English. So we write and then give it to her. Then she will sit with us and correct our language, structure of the sentence, etc. So in that sense, if I am using ChatGPT to redraft my idea, I feel it is fine. But if you are asking an idea from the ChatGPT, is a problem.
The way we sort of worked around ChatGPT because I remember it so vividly. It launched today. The next day, I was in our South Asia seminar room. So there are undergrads who would also come there and sit. And everybody's like, these were kids from Wharton who were doing like all that. Like suddenly they're putting prompts and pasting text. But thing in Penn is that these kids have really fought to come to that university. Like it's one of the top universities in the country. And they're very, very peculiar about their grades. For them, A minus is like fail. They cannot, like at the max, they would be settled for an A. So me and my professor told them, okay, this is what ChatGPT, and we showed them, okay, this is what ChatGPT does. If you submit this, at the max, you'll get a B plus. Okay, because both, like between me and my professor, I can still figure out just by reading that this is a ChatGPT essay. Like you don't need like much. If you've read enough, you realize this is generated over like a LLM model. So then the use got curtailed, but people still use it in like very different ways. And as you said, like to improve on what you've already written, or to like I use it to like shorten text, for example. Okay, if you write like 1,000-word thing, how do you like condense it in like 500 or whatever? So that is something that I use it for. But we were lucky also in like in some of our masters and PhD programs that some of our faculty were really like individually they were interested in how we write. So they really worked on our writing. So they took special courses, special classes with us where they just worked on our writing, our structuring, where you need to introduce which sentence, but these are like, you are at the mercy of like individual benevolence of your professors. I don't think we have, as a system, we have not able to cater to that problem.
And also the sheer volume of the work in India that a teacher does.
Yeah.
It's not possible. Say, for example, I have 60 students in a class, and And invariably I'm taking two sections, one to students. Imagine if I've given them a writing assignment, 120 scripts here.
And you don't have a TA also.
I have to teach 16 hours a week. Plus
So at least we do that grunt work of like correcting, you know. So like the professor will come and teach, we'll grade, we'll also do tutorials with them, like we just separate ours with the students. So yeah,
that system is not.
yeah, we don't, and because we also not, I mean, at the end of it, it comes to like how much you want to invest in education. And we've seen that the budget of education is just like decreasing actually
It's
every
not
year.
only that, even there are institutions right now which are charging very high level,
Yeah,
but they are following the same system.
yeah.
That means you are paying 10 lakhs for no reason.
So,
Recently I came to know that all the national hospitals have increased to 6 lakhs.
what these are state universities, like state
It's
institutes,
a kind of public-private kind. Yeah,
okay,
it is.
like NLU and all this
Yeah,
stuff.
but they are also charging 6 lakhs. And then maybe better than other colleges, but not as good as the universities when it comes to India support.
Yeah.
That's all.
Yes.
That calls for a wrap up. I would like to thank Mr. Naik for a very insightful discussion. Thank you for being here and enlightening us on the topic. Also, thank you to the audience for being very supportive, very cooperative, for your questions and your time spent. Thank you one and all. That's it for today.